What grade do the Bengals deserve in free agency after adding plenty of key pieces and seeing some of their best players leave in free agency? Let's get into it. Hi again, everyone, and welcome in to Cincinnati Bengals Talk. I'm James Rapien of allbengals.com. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell here on YouTube as we continue to give you, the latest Bengals news. And whether it was Irv Smith Jr., whether it was Orlando Brown Jr., whether it was Nick Scott, we've tried to give you the best free agency coverage out there. And free agency essentially winding down right now. The Bengals may add a veteran running back. I wouldn't rule that out. Katie Blackburn talking earlier this week about Joe Mixon and Joe Burrow and all of those things. And I reacted to a lot of that stuff on the Locked On Bengals podcast. So it's right here on YouTube, by the way, if you want to check that out. But the thing I haven't done is grade the Bengals free agency haul, what they were able to do. And they got better in some key areas. Let me just give you some thoughts, and then I'll give you some grades. To me, we've spent years and years talking about the offensive line. And even going into this free agency period, I said, go get the best right tackle. If you can go get the best right tackle, maybe they're not the best on the market. Maybe they're not the best right tackle in the NFL, but it's going to be an upgrade. And it's going to plug a key weakness. Well, the Bengals, they did sort of that. They go get Orlando Brown Jr., a left tackle, who I thought was completely out of their price range. I never expected him to sign a 4-year, $64 million contract. In fact, there were a lot of rumors and projections, 5 years, $110 million, $120 million, like high money. And I knew the Bengals wouldn't swim in those waters. And by the way, I like Orlando Brown Jr., and I'm going to grade the signing in a second. I wouldn't swim in those waters because a signing like that would keep you from keeping a T. Higgins or keeping one of these key pieces that you want to make a Bengal for a long time. So the Bengals had to make some tough decisions. But the hardest one, I think, on the fan base was losing Jessie Bates and Vonn Bell. And people are worried about the safety spot. But over the past few years, if I would have told you, hey, the Bengals are going to be, let's just say, and I don't think Dax Hill and Nick Scott are going to be bad together, but let's just say the Bengals safety play is going to be bad, but they're going to trade that for quality tackle play. They're going to trade that to keep number 9 upright. You would sign up for that, right? And so I can't rip the Bengals for getting cheaper in an area at safety where they're going to have to spend at receiver. They're going to obviously spend at quarterback. They're spending on the offensive line. They're spending on the defensive line. That's just my overall thoughts on some of that. But let's dive in, though, to each signing. Orlando Brown Jr., it's an A+. It is. 4 years, $64 million. It feels like a steal. And I know he's not perfect. They don't need perfect. They don't need Anthony Munoz. They don't need Andrew Whitworth. They need a guy who is going to be a quality pass blocker, bring some nastiness in the run game, and be able to keep Joe Burrow upright when needed. Orlando Brown Jr. can do that. He did it at right tackle for the Ravens. He did it at left tackle for the Chiefs, and I think he's going to do it at left tackle again for the Bengals. A+, great value signing when you look at the money that he was projected to get versus what he got. And I love this signing for the Bengals. And it makes them better because as of today, Jonah Williams is their right tackle. And I know there's talk about a competition and all of those things, and it sounds good. Jonah, unless they get a really good offer or unless they pick a quality tackle with that 28th pick, I would expect Jonah, and both of those things probably have to happen, but I would expect Jonah to be in stripes. Now, that could change, but they're not going to give Jonah Williams away because they believe he can be a quality right tackle. And so now both of your tackle spots you feel pretty good about if you're the Bengals. I know people are low on Jonah, just telling you how the Bengals feel. So A+ for Orlando Brown Jr., and let's get rolling through some of these guys. Nick Scott. Here's why I like this signing. 27, former 7th rounder, has worked his way up. So he should be entering his prime. He's battle tested. He's played in big games. He's experienced. He has experience on special teams where he cut his teeth early in his career, has a great character guy. And so when I look at this signing, 3 years, $12 million, well, it gets you cheaper in the safety room, but you're not going to be awful there. You have a first-round pick in Dax Hill, who I thought was a great pick at the time. And I know people are low on him because he didn't play much. Just wait. And Nick Scott. I feel pretty good about that, especially with a guy like Tyson Anderson, who is a really, really athletic second-year safety as well. Could they draft one? Yeah, maybe. I think it would be later in the draft, though, if they went that route. Obviously, they re-signed guys like Michael J. Thomas and some other key veterans in that secondary. Jalen Davis, I thought that was a nice signing. So we'll see. Obviously, we're grading the external free agents that they added. So for Nick Scott, I would give it a B+. I think it's pretty good value. I think he's around for the foreseeable future, and he's ascending. And you're going to get him in his prime for less than you would have had to pay Bell. In fact, about half the price. A little more than that, but about half the price of what you'd pay Bell, who's older. And I like Vonn Bell a lot, but I think Nick Scott is more versatile, fits with Baxell better. Let's keep it rolling with Sidney Jones. And I want to get to Irv Smith Jr. in a second, but Sidney Jones to me can be Eli Apple's replacement. I think Eli Apple could come back into the fold after the draft if the Bengals don't take a corner, an outside corner. But young, they think he can be ascending. He's dealt with some injury issues, but it feels sort of like Eli Apple a few years ago when the Bengals took a chance on him. Now, Eli Apple had some of the Twitter fingers that made him a little more controversial even then. But Sidney Jones is someone that former second-round pick, had a good season a few years ago, has flashed his potential, hasn't been able to put it all together. We'll see if Lou Anarumo and Robert Livingston and really this entire defensive staff can get the most out of a guy like Sidney Jones and Nick Scott. I think both guys, obviously Scott's going to start. Sidney Jones is a nice depth signing, and depending on Chidobe Awuzie, it could be a day one starter. We'll see. I think Awuzie will be back, though. That's just my guess, purely a guess. But for Sidney Jones, I think that this is a solid signing, and I'm going to give it a B. I don't really think you can knock it. Cody Ford, it's fine because it's $1 million, but he's just a depth piece. And I know they're saying, oh, well, tackle, not guard. And he's been playing guard. He's been playing out of position. And I know they really liked him pre-draft, all of those things. That's fine. C-, C in that range. I'll say C- just because I don't think he's a great player or has that untapped potential necessarily that some of these other guys have. But you need bodies in the offensive line room. And so I'm not going to knock you if you can get a former second rounder for $1 million and have him potentially compete for a backup tackle spot. I don't think that's, a bad signing. I just don't think anyone should be over the moon about it that Cody Ford is a member of the Cincinnati Bengals. And then the other external free agent that I want to get to, Irv Smith Jr., the numbers came out and Field Yates reported them of ESPN. $1.75 million for Irv Smith Jr. this year. Could make up to $2 million with incentives. This is the ultimate value signing. This guy had options, and it was probably another one-year deal from Miami, but he had another option from an AFC playoff team with familiar faces, all of those things. Comes to the Bengals, and you get him for a third, less than a third. Well, roughly a third. No, less. Bad at math. I'm doing the Hayden Hurst math. Less than a third of what Hurst is going to make over the next 3 years. He's much younger. And yes, he's dealt with injuries. There's no doubt about it. I get it. But just think about what they paid Hurst last year, 3.5. They get a guy in Irv Smith Jr. later in free agency, and they were trying to get a Foster Moreau. They were trying to get someone else, at tight end. I think for a longer-term deal, I don't think they necessarily wanted to do another one-year deal. But that doesn't mean Irv Smith Jr. can't be here for the foreseeable future. He's young. That's the difference between Hurst and Smith. Hurst had always felt like a one-year stop. Smith, if he performs, even if the Bengals draft a tight end, which they're going to do, I think you could re-sign him, depending on what the money is. But if he performs and is a nice piece of this offense, why wouldn't you want to stick around? So to me, I love the signing. I love the value. A+. Outside of the Orlando Brown Jr. signing, what's not to love about this guy? He's got that pedigree. He's a former second rounder. He was 20 years old when he was drafted. He's only 24 now, entering his age 25 season. This should be his prime. He's about to enter it. And so who knows? Maybe he'll stay healthy and make an impact for the Bengals. Would not shock me one bit if Irv Smith Jr. does that. The Irv Smith signing might have seemed like the end of the line for potential free agent additions. maybe Ezekiel Elliott. Well, the Bengals brought in Tarell Basham last week for a visit, and they officially signed him on Friday. It was announced by his agent, and I like the signing a lot because what is one of the things when you were looking at that defense last year that you thought they're missing a little bit of something? Pass rush. Tarell Basham instantly joins this pass rush rotation, gives the Bengals a proven body. He's 29 years old. And no, you look at his career, he's got 11 sacks throughout his career, but he's a rotational piece that can help beef up that defensive line room, and specifically that edge rush that the Bengals are kind of limited from a depth standpoint. You have Jeff Gunter on the back end there from last season. You have a guy like Cam Sample who certainly emerged. We know about Joseph Osai, but behind the big two, Trey Hendricks and Sam Hubbard, you want to get a little bit more there. And so Tarell Basham's a former third rounder. He was the 80th overall pick in the 2017 NFL draft by the Colts. He's bounced around. There's no doubt about it. He's played for the Colts and the Jets and the Cowboys last year and the Titans. He's played at a lot of different places, but he also played at OU. So not only is he returning to Ohio, but he played under Jimmy Burrow. He played for Jimmy Burrow, who was his defensive coordinator for the Bobcats. So that's kind of a full circle moment. And now he's going to be teammates with Joe Burrow. So I don't think it's a huge impact signing. I think it's fine. I think you're able to beef up that defensive line with another veteran. I don't think it's going to impact their draft plans at all. So this signing, if I had to give it a grade, and this is an instant reaction, this just happened 15 minutes ago. I'd give it a C plus, something in that range. It's not really going to sway anything, but if the Bengals enjoyed the visit with him, maybe they can get a little bit more out of him, and maybe he can be a rotational piece in that defensive end room. That said, the Bengals have, done a lot in free agency, and they've lost a lot. They've gained a lot. And so when I look at their team as a whole, you lose Hayden Hurst, you lose Vonn Bell and Jessie Bates, and that hurts. It does, no doubt about it. But your biggest weakness, offensive line, it should be a strength. It should. And especially now with me comfortable penciling in Jonah, maybe they trade him, but he's on the roster today. I think they plan on him playing right tackle. And I know Zach Taylor called it a competition. I think they plan on him playing right tackle. So if your left to right is Orlando Brown Jr., Cordell Volson, Ted Karras, Alex Kappa, and then you got Jonah Williams, I think that's a pretty darn good offensive line. I do. And so one of their biggest weaknesses, let's be honest, over the past few years, should now be a strength. And one of their biggest strengths, safety, is now a question mark. But they were able to keep Jermaine Pratt, which keeps that front seven intact of that defense. They were able to add a guy, like I said, in Irv Smith Jr. that I really like. Is a flyer on offense. We know what this team is, and I think they have a lot of good pieces. Now, losing Samaje Perine stinks. And that's why I keep mentioning Ezekiel Elliott. Maybe they go that route and they're able to land someone like him. But if they don't, that's a hole. And he leaves behind a hole there where it's like, all right, pass blocking back that you trust in crunch time. Who is it? Is that going to be Joe Mixon? I'm not sure. I'm not going to make this a running back discussion. Is it Travion Williams? Is it someone else that isn't on the roster? We'll see there, but that is a question mark. So there's certainly still some questions with this roster. I think they could use a 3-tech defensive tackle. That seems to be like something they would find in the draft more so than Kalijah Cansey, by the way, more so than it necessarily right now. There's just not much out there. And unless you're looking for depth, which I don't think they're going to spend any more on the defensive line. Basham is going to be, I don't know the exact cost, but I'm sure it's around $1 million, something like that. So looking at it, I think the Bengals are better where it matters. They've gotten a little worse in some areas, but overall, I think they're a better team than they were when free agency began or before free agency. I'm going to give them a B+ for what they've done in free agency. I think they're better. I think they're in a better position to succeed, which is win the Super Bowl. Keep Joe Burrow upright. You feel better about your chances, right? So I'm glad that they invested there, and we'll see if the moves pay off. We'll see if they do anything else. Heck, we had recorded half of this, the entire video, and had to re-record about half of it because of the Tarell Basham news. I wanted to make sure that everything gelled together. So I'm sure Andrew's really loving that part. But overall, B+. I think the Bengals got a lot better in free agency. And this could go up to an A- now. If you get Zeke at a cheap rate, it's probably an A-. If you are able to extend Joe Burrow or extend T. Higgins or extend both of those guys or Logan Wilson, there are plenty of paths to this being an A+ offseason or an A offseason for the Bengals, even though I'm giving them a B+ right now in free agency. I think they've gotten better, certainly above average. I'm not at that A mark yet. That could change. Until then, if it does change, if anything happens, Bengals-wise, we have you covered here on CBT. So hit that subscribe button, ring the bell. And for our channel coordinator, Andrew Fox-Miller, I'm James Rapien, signing off for now. Thank you so much for watching Cincinnati Bengals Talk.